want to ask also about those two amazing pieces of tape. The first one is, and I don't know, Sebastian, maybe you know how this was actually being recorded when Kamaran is at the front, and somebody, I think maybe Karen's narrating, then talks about bullets whizzing, and you literally, I'm not sure I've heard that in real tape before, that whiz of the bullets. How was he recording that, and how did that get recovered?
It's a great question. So Kamaran went to the front line with a tape recorder, with an audio recorder in his bag, and after he was shot, he was wounded. The Peshmerga put him in the back of a pickup truck with his bag, with his camera, and just before, they were going to take his body off the battlefield. He was going to be rescued, but just at that moment, ISIS spotted them and started firing right at the pickup truck. And the driver slammed his foot on the gas, and they hadn't put the tailgate up. And Kamaran rolled out the back of the pickup truck, but his bag and his camera remained in the pickup truck. So that's how his equipment was rescued, but Kamaran wasn't. And so the following day, the day after we went to Kirkuk to retrieve his body, and we found out that he was alive, we then discovered that his equipment, his camera and his audio recorder, were being held by the Peshmerga. And so we went and picked it up and retrieved it.
Mm-hmm. And there was no problem getting that from them?
No, not at all. I mean, because I was with Ahmed, I was with his brother, and so the Peshmerga said, this belongs to Kamaran, this belongs to his family. Yeah. In terms of collecting audio, again, I talked about it earlier, but it was a very odd role for me. It's not an odd role. For the first 9 months, maybe a year, I'd say, or even a year and a half, I had no role as a journalist in this. I wasn't reporting this story. I was trying to rescue Kamaran. And in fact, I spent a huge amount of my time trying to enforce a media blackout about the story, because Kamaran had worked for the Washington Post and Der Spiegel in Germany. There was interest in publishing stories about him. And so we had to work very hard to make sure that no one reported on him because he was a hostage. You don't want that to be in the news, because you lose control of any sort of information and story, and ISIS might be able to use it to their advantage and against you. So I'd spent a lot of time, in fact, trying to stop people reporting on what had happened. When it came time to do the story with rough translation, my role then switched to then being a journalist. So my job at that point was then to report on the story, to collect this audio. And assume the other piece of tape you were going to ask about was his call from captivity.
Right.
And that was just a total and utter piece of luck that Birwa, his best friend from growing up, had espionage aspirations. Like he wanted to be a CIA agent when he was younger. And so he had an app on his phone that recorded all his phone calls. And it's just by chance that smartphones had been invented and that he downloaded that app and that he had that phone call recorded. So we were able to get that phone call. There are actually no other phone calls from Kamaran, but there are there's other recordings from that day that Birwa took that we were able to use to inform a lot of our background reporting about what actually was transpiring. So it was very useful.
Great. So there's a story about Kamaran that's really key to it's what he says was the inspiration for starting the photo agency. And I think it raises a really interesting journalistic question that, I'd like to ask to all of you if you have thoughts. he had been out taking pictures, I can't remember where it was, but of a bombing, aftermath of a bombing, you know, comes back, files his pictures, and I don't know to what newsroom it was, but, you know, then he talks to the editor who got his photos, who said, well, you know, actually there was a bigger bomb somewhere else today, so we're going to run those pictures instead. And Kamaran, I think we hear his voice in the story from a video saying that that's the moment that he kind of realized, you know, this photography is making money off of the killing of people, and he wants to do something different because that's not the full story of Iraq. And, you know, that's one of those kind of cynical journalistic moments. We're not going to use your pictures because there was a bigger bombing today. Ugh. I mean, how does that make you feel when you hear that?
I'll just start off and then I'll let Karen and Gregory tell their versions. But that story, Kamaran was one of the first memorable stories that Kamaran told me when we first met in 2008. And this is when he was just starting to think about this photo agency and what it was about. In fact, it's even more cynical than that, because in the way photojournalism worked with Iraqi stringers is the wire agencies paid you directly for the photograph. So Kamaran had gone to Kirkuk to photograph this car bomb, and then he was called his editor to say, I've got these pictures. And the editor said, I'm not going to buy the photographs because there's a bigger bomb in Mosul, and those are the pictures I'm going to buy. So it wasn't even that Kamaran took the pictures on assignment. He was taking the pictures on spec, and, you know, couldn't even get paid to do the work because there was something more atrocious that had happened at the same time somewhere else in the country. But yes, that definitely was, and that was very informative. It was a very meaningful moment to me to then help him or co-found this photo agency together, because as an American news consumer, the only pictures I'd ever seen of Iraq were of violence. And the only pictures I'd ever seen of Iraq, to be honest, were taken by American, European, South African, Japanese photographers. I didn't see many pictures of, you know, by Iraqi photographers. And Kamaran's friends, photojournalist friends, I met them when I first went in 2008. And the pictures that they showed me that they were taking showed a completely different side to Iraq. And I was like, oh, and this is way before journalism was talking about representation. It was just very clear. A naive American shows up and is like, oh wait, it doesn't look like that. There's so much more going on here. And so that's what inspired me, along with Kamaran's ridiculous charisma, to stop my entire life, move to Iraq, and help them start a photo agency.
I mean, just to piggyback on that, I mean, yeah, that moment that Kamaran has, of course, resonates with anybody who has had to make news overseas. And I mean, that I will just say that it came up also when we were thinking about this story and not making it just about kidnapping, actually not making it just about the dark things. I mean, we wanted to emphasize friendship and what it means, how we move on and what we have to do in moments. So bringing out those themes was very important. But also I will say that in terms of, it's something that we think about a lot in rough translation, what is newsworthy overseas? And in some ways, what we set up here with the podcast, and that's very explicitly not about the news, but comes in a different perspective, kind of does allow us, I think, to try to continue that kind of work of not making it just about the headline, if the headline's kind of sad.
Karen, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to reduce people, especially people far away, to the most sensational thing about them. Even I did a story last week that had to do with race, and the people who were not as close to the story were trying to reduce her to a moment in her childhood when she desegregated schools. And it actually wasn't the most significant thing about her. And so there's a push anytime you make a story where something sensational happens to a person to make them to just distill it down to that thing. But to the point of the reason why Gregory started the podcast is, you know, having stories hit close to home means letting people be all the things that they are, you know, not just the most sensational thing that they are. And I think that's how, yeah, we've worked really hard to try to make him a person that you related to before you get to the kidnapping. And it was really important to us that that be a big part of it.
Yeah.